Okay, picture this. It's October 1st, 331 BC. Two of the most massive armies the world had ever seen are facing off on a huge, dusty plain in what's now modern-day Iraq. And let me tell you, this was not just another battle. This was it, the final, world-altering showdown for the fate of an entire civilization.
The stakes? Well, they couldn't have been higher. You've got Alexander the Great, the young, seemingly unstoppable Macedonian king on one side, and on the other, Darius III, the King of Kings, ruler of the colossal Persian Empire. Everything he had, everything his ancestors had conquered for centuries, it was all on the line, to be won or lost in a single day.
So, to really get how this epic clash went down, we're going to break it into 6 parts. We'll look at the road that led them here, compare the two armies, check out the battlefield, and then dive deep into Alexander's insane tactics. After that, we'll see the empire fall apart, and finally, what kind of new world rose from the ashes.
So how did we even get to this point? I mean, Alexander had already scored some huge victories against the Persians and even conquered Egypt, where a lot of people actually saw him as a liberator. But Darius, oh, he was far from done. He was back in the heart of his empire, pulling together a new, absolutely massive army for one last, desperate stand.
What's wild about this timeline is just the sheer unstoppable momentum. In just a couple of years, Alexander had steamrolled through the western parts of the Persian Empire. His success was just unbelievable. But the job wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The heart of the empire and its king were still out there.
You know, Darius really tried to stop this war. He kept sending bigger and better offers to Alexander. All the land west of the Euphrates River, his daughter's hand in marriage, a ridiculous ransom. His top general, Parmenion, even told him, "You know, if I were you, I'd take that deal." Alexander's famous reply? "So would I, if I were Parmenion." But no, he wasn't having it. For him, Asia could only have one king, and he was going to win it with his spear.
This right here is a perfect example of the strategic chess match that was going on. See, Darius figured Alexander would take the obvious route, marching straight down the river to Babylon. He even had his general get ready to burn all the crops to starve out the Macedonians. But Alexander, he was a master of logistics and totally unpredictable. He took a longer, northern route. Why? Better weather, better supplies from local farms, and it completely wrecked Darius's plan before the first sword was even drawn.
Now let's talk about the players. We've got two very different kings leading two very different armies. And folks, this is the classic setup. A smaller, professional, high-quality force going up against a seemingly overwhelming giant.
In one corner, you have Alexander. He's just 25 years old, leading about 47,000 battle-hardened veterans. His army is this perfectly balanced machine, and he's already a tactical legend. In the other corner, you have Darius. A decent ruler, sure, but no military genius. He'd already run from Alexander once, at the Battle of Issus. And yeah, his army was huge. Some say over 100,000 men, but it was a patchwork of troops from all over his empire. And just look at this breakdown. The real power of Darius's army was his cavalry. He had elite horsemen from all over, like Bactria and Scythia. He also had professional soldiers, like the famous 10,000 immortals, and even Greek mercenaries. But the bulk of his force? Just regular guys pulled from all corners of the empire. This incredible diversity was also a massive weakness, creating huge communication problems that Alexander was absolutely going to exploit. So with Alexander taking that unexpected northern route, Darius had to scramble to find a new battlefield, and he chose his ground very, very carefully, setting up for a fight that he truly believed he could not lose. Right, so this is the key. Darius basically gave up the element of surprise. He found a massive, flat plain and had his guys level it out, clearing away any bushes or rocks. He was creating a perfect killing field for his two trump cards, his thousands of cavalry and his 200 scythed chariots. Then, he just sat there and waited for Alexander to walk into his trap. So, the night before the battle, Parmenion comes up to Alexander and suggests a surprise night attack. Alexander's response is legendary. Now yeah, it sounds like pure bravado, but it was also a brilliant tactical move. A night battle is chaotic, super risky, and it would have canceled out his army's biggest advantage, its discipline. Plus, here's the kicker. Because Darius was afraid of a night attack, he made his entire army stay awake, in formation, all night long. By the time the sun came up, they were already exhausted. All right, and now we get to the battle itself. Alexander is outnumbered, he's about to be outflanked, and he's fighting on ground the enemy handpicked. His solution? A plan so audacious, so brilliant, it's literally still studied in war colleges today.
Okay, let's break this down step by step. First, Alexander doesn't just march straight forward. He moves his whole army sideways, to the right, like he's about to march right off the battlefield Darius so carefully prepared. This totally freaks out Darius. Second, Darius orders his cavalry on the left to ride out and stop him. This was the bait. As more and more Persian cavalry charge out to the side, they start pulling away from their own center, stretching their line thin. Third, this creates exactly what Alexander was waiting for, a gap, a hole, right next to where Darius himself was standing. And finally, the hammer blow. Alexander wheels his elite companion cavalry, forms them into a wedge, and drives like a spearhead right through that gap, aiming straight for Darius.
But what about those super scary scythed chariots? Darius launched them right at the Macedonian center, hoping they'd shred the infantry to pieces. But Alexander had trained his men for this exact moment. His light infantry chucked javelins at them, taking out drivers. And for any chariots that actually made it through, the infantry just opened up lanes in their formation, letting the chariots pass harmlessly through the gaps, where they were easily dealt with in the back. Another key Persian weapon, totally useless. And we have to talk about the phalanx for a second. This was the backbone, the anvil of Alexander's army. Just the sight of this thing, a solid wall of men holding 20-foot-long pikes, was terrifying. Its power wasn't just physical, it was psychological. When this wall of spear points started marching towards you, it could break your spirit before a single fight even started. So Alexander's charge worked perfectly. He smashed the Persian line and sent Darius fleeing in terror for the second time in his life. But, believe it or not, the battle was far from over. In fact, for the Macedonians, it was teetering on the edge of a complete disaster.
So the King of Kings is on the run. The head of the snake is cut off, right? But what about the rest of the body? Well, on the other side of the battlefield, a completely different, much bloodier story was unfolding. While Alexander was having his moment of glory on the right, his old trusted general Parmenion was in deep, deep trouble on the left. The Persian cavalry on that side was actually fighting brilliantly, surrounding the Macedonians and pushing them to the brink of collapse. An urgent message gets to Alexander. He has an impossible choice: chase down Darius and end the war right there, or turn back and save his army from being wiped out. He chose his men.
Alexander wheeled his cavalry around, smashed into the back of the Persian right wing, and saved Parmenion. The battle turned into a total rout. The numbers you see from ancient historians are just staggering. Some say 40,000 Persians died compared to less than 500 Macedonians. Now, you got to take those numbers with a grain of salt. It's almost certainly propaganda, but it gives you a sense of just how complete this victory was.
When the dust finally settled on that plain, the world was a different place. The consequences of this one day of fighting would echo for centuries to come.
The immediate results were just massive.
The Persian Empire's military was shattered beyond repair. Alexander marched into the great city of Babylon and was crowned King of Asia. The wealthiest cities in the world were now his for the taking. But this victory did more than just conquer an empire. It kicked open the doors between Greece and Asia, starting this incredible new era of culture, commerce, and ideas that we now call the Hellenistic Age.
This table really sums it all up. Militarily, it was a knockout blow that left Darius a fugitive, eventually hunted by his own people. Politically, it was the end of the line for the great Persian Empire founded by Cyrus the Great, and it made Alexander the undisputed master of a huge chunk of the known world. It was, for all intents and purposes, a total regime change.
But Gaugamela was a turning point for Alexander in another, more personal way. Drunk on all this unbelievable power, his character, it began to change. In the years that followed, he grew harsher, more paranoid, even cruel. He would eventually murder one of his closest friends, the very man who saved his life, in a drunken rage. And so we're left with this one last, nagging question. He won the entire world, but in the process, what part of himself did he lose?